Take a start. All right.
Um,
Well, welcome everyone
I'm-
to our January WEAll talk. For those who are joining this space for the very first time, WEAll Talks is a space where we come together to listen to one of the WEAll members share about their work, their projects, their ideas, and but mainly is a very participatory event. So Niels, who is our speaker today, is going to have around 20 minutes to share with you a really interesting topic on building for wellness. And one of the most important things that, apart from listening to him, is that this is for all of you to feel safe and to feel in a brave space where we can all participate, where we can all add value to the whole conversation and discussion. So it's a real pleasure for me to see all your faces. I always love this WEAll talk for many different reasons, for the learnings, for the exchange, for the fantastic energy that is shared among all the participants. So I want to say thank you, obviously, to Niels for being our speaker, but thank you to all of you for joining and for participating in the discussion. I'm just gonna say a little bit of what we're going to be talking today. So today, sorry, I did the title wrong at the very beginning. So it's, the title is Building for Mental Wellness. And cities offer a breadth of opportunities for work and play, yet prolonged exposure to city noise and unhealthy air quality, the hustle and bustle of city life, and the felt lack of community and nature can also negatively impact our health and well-being. The external environments in which we live and work have a tremendous effect on our inner lives and wellness. And our inner lives, in turn, influence our behaviors and actions and the lives of the people around us. And here is Niels to develop around all this that is so important for all of us. Niels Devisscher is Content and Ecosystem Strategies at Massawa, the Mental Wellness Impact Fund, with a background in international business, the visual arts, and systems thinking. He explores topics of enlightenment, healing, and well-being. He is on a mission to support change makers revolutioning how we think about, approach, and innovate mental wellness within the wider context of living systems. So Niels, thank you so much for being here, our speaker today. Just one tiny thing. While Niels is sharing with all of us, if you want to leave any message, if you want to write on the chat, if you want to share anything, I'll keep track of that to make sure that I'll share it with Niels when he has finished. But just be ready to get your mic open and talk, because this is a WEAll talk and we want you all to participate. So thank you again. And Niels, they're all yours.
Thank you so much, Anna. That's a wonderful introduction. I'm super grateful to be here with all of you. I've been looking forward to this for a long time, and I'm going to try to do my best to make this interesting and engaging for everyone. It's a topic I'm deeply passionate about myself and at Massawa. So yeah, let's dive into it. I'm going to try and share my screen. Let's see. And then all I need to do is, all right. Yeah, this is this annoying thing here that doesn't need to move. Let me.
It was, well, I don't know the other ones, but it was
yeah, it's okay. Yeah. So as Anna introduced, I'll be talking about building for mental wellness, how we can design cities in such a way that they're actually beneficial for our mental health rather than disadvantages. As Anna said, I have a background in international entrepreneurship and visual arts, which I try to combine here at Massawa as well. And I'd like to start with this quote by Jane Jacobs: "People make cities, and it's to them and not buildings that we must fit our plans." I think this is so important because in this day and age, I don't think we can no longer allow city planners who are solely motivated by profit motives to design cities that impact the well-being of its citizens and in bigger terms, also the futures of them. So very briefly, before we dive into it, a small word about Masawa. We invest in early stage startups radically improving access to mental health, mental wellness, and we do so with a nurture capital approach that kind of weaves together purpose, people, and profit. And we really look at founder well-being, organizational health, and social impact. And the reason we do this is because we need to rethink the role and responsibility of impact investors in addressing the mental health crisis. And I think it's absolutely necessary if you really want to shift to a well-being economy. So just to get things straight, a small definition of mental health. Mental health is a state of well-being in which individual realizes their own abilities, can cope with the stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to their community. And what we at Masawa kind of want to add to this is a dimension of mental wellness. And the way we define this, and I know there's a ton of other definitions, but we see it as a practice and process of reconnecting with our authentic self, each other, and the natural world. And I believe that city planners and designers play a key role in putting in motion and like continuously evolving this process of reconnection and relationship creation. And that's why I believe it's so important that we involve citizens of places in decision making and design processes, to really taking this bottom-up approach. So to start, I would like to ask you, and you can just drop this in the chat, what 3 things are about the place in which you live, which you absolutely love or consider beneficial to your mental well-being. It can be anything. Try to see the chat here. Oh. So yeah, any proximity to green spaces, parks, see my garden, house, beauty. Oh, I love that one. Yes. Sea, forest, open space. There's community cycling infrastructure. Growing your own food, yes. Amazing. Please continue to do so. I will already continue with the next slide, but keep on posting in the chat. And I think I will kind of want to go into very briefly my story of place, because I think if we really want to create cities that work for everyone, we kind of need to start looking at the narratives that of how people experience the cities and what they find important. So I'm born in Antwerp, Belgium, but from a very early age, my parents decided to move to the countryside because they felt like I needed to be able to play in the streets, to be in the proximity of nature, which I absolutely love, because I think I've always had like this certain sensibility towards the aliveness of all things. I've always loved like strolling through nature, through meadows, through forests and fields. And yeah, this is what I absolutely loved about it. But on the other hand, I also find it difficult to connect to the people in that place. And I never felt like I truly belonged. So I needed this place with creativity, diversity, artistic expression. And I know this all sounds very positive, but I could find that in Berlin. So that's why I moved here about 2 years ago. And the beauty about Berlin is that it offers access to nature and green and open spaces, and it kind of does a lot to foster the sense of community. And I think the best example of that is Tempelhofer Feld. It used to be an airfield that's now turned into a public space. And as you can see, maybe on the picture, it's rather small, but there's a lot of area for community gardening. There's designated barbecue spaces, sports areas. And I think I've come to realize that what I like about it best is that Tempelhofer Feld for me is like this, almost like a designated area. And it's like a continuously unfolding narrative in which people continuously contribute. They create their own chapters within it. And it offers both a space for individualization and shared identity. So people really can express their true selves, I feel, like whether it's skating or dance or music, but it's also this coming together of people that makes it so beautiful. And the reason why I attach so much importance to Story of Place is because if you really want to care for the people and become good stewards of the place we live in, we need to fall in love with the place again in which we live. And part of the way we can do this is, I think, by listening to each other's stories and our subjective experiences of the place we live in. So before going further, I would like to ask you again, what are 3 things that you imagine the city of the future should embody? 3 things that make mental wellness a priority. And you can again describe this in 3 words. So what is missing in your current situation or the place you live in? And this might be the same things as you answered before. It could be different things, but just to kind of imagine what that would look like. Co-living with nature. I like that, Doug. Nature at the heart. Integrated nature, yes. Love all these answers. There's definitely a theme here. Okay, so I'm slowly gonna energy cohesion. Interesting. Renewal, lots of games, fun, yes. Participation, trust, and equality. I'm glad I'm not the only idealist here. Great. So yeah, if we think about imagination and what the future city would look like, this is not something that we just started doing. We've been doing this for decades. And for example, if you look at this picture in the top left corner from 1900s, we imagined that in the year 2000, we would have what it looks like a chocolate factory being carried forward by steam trains. We would have in the second picture a huge monument that would commemorate human ingenuity and the achievements of the human race when it comes to technological advancements. And on the top image in the right corner, which dates back from 1969 at the midst of the Cold War, people were imagining underground bunkers that would keep us safe from the threats of the outside world, which kind of makes me think that imagination is a product of its time. It's kind of the memory, it's kind of this coming together, or a better way to say it is that how we perceive the future in a lot of ways is the memory of the past, is about the current zeitgeist, about current political and economic agendas. But I think also when you scratch the surface of these images and you go a bit deeper, they also tell us something about human needs. We have the deeper need to be safe from the threats of the outside world. We want to keep ourselves secure and safe. We want to feel recognition for our human ingenuity, for our progress. And I don't really have a story for the chocolate factory one. I don't know, maybe we all love chocolate, or we want to bring the products that are now in a globalized economy closer to home. Whatever you want. But if you bring it a little bit closer to home, there's a solar punk movement that kind of came into being in 2008. And I was imagining the future in which our greatest ecological challenges are solved. And what's interesting about this is that they kind of want to tackle change the story of separation, and rather than seeing us as divided from nature, bring us back within nature and really incorporate it in our design. So this is much closer to our current challenges. And why I stretch this so much is that we need to reimagine the cities anew, because as we see, the city population rises and is an increased risk of mental health issues. So 50% of people today live in cities, and this number is expected to increase by 2050. And people, 1 in 5 people globally are dealing with a mental health condition, and 1 in 4 is said to develop a mental health condition in the course of their lifetime. And city living has a heightened impact on our mental health. People living in cities are twice as likely to have schizophrenia or to develop schizophrenia. And 20%, there's a 20% increased risk of anxiety and a 40% increased risk of depression. And I think there's many different ways and many different angles we can take of this, but I would like to focus on nature and community because those are the two things that I personally value a lot. And there's a lot more in the report in case you're interested. So we see that children who live in areas with lowest level of green space had a 55% greater risk of developing psychiatric disorders as adults. And people living in the proximity of natural spaces are more likely to have higher levels of mental well-being and quality of life. And doctors are now also doing green prescribing, which basically is a way to increase people's mental well-being by allowing them time to go to nature. And spending time in green spaces and bringing nature into everyday life can benefit our mental health. It improves our mindfulness, creativity, increases our happiness, and reduces level of stress, anxiety, and depression. And I think that in considering this whole topic, biodiversity matters too. It's not just enough to have access to a park with all of the same trees. There's been research done into the therapeutic effects of walking in nature, and it's been shown that if you hear birds, for example, the therapeutic effects are higher than without the songs of birds. And I think it's because we are all interconnected with nature, and we need to escape sometimes from this kind of echo chamber of human voices. We need to hear the songs of other species too. And we need the activation of different and all senses. That's why smell is so important, why touch is so important. And I think another important thing is biophilic design. And I think green spaces, yes, I think that's more of the obvious answer, but nowadays biophilic design is also becoming more and more important. And it's not to replace natural ecosystems, but I believe to complement them. The way I see it is that if what is present in your physical environment, you're paying attention to, and what you're paying attention to kind of transforms how you see the world. It has the potential to transform our beliefs and our values, because those are often based on whatever is present directly around us. So seeing aliveness also awakens our own aliveness in that sense. And then wilderness areas are also very important, but considering the time, I will get into that another time maybe. So thinking about social interaction. So I want to see some faces. So we humans are inherently social creatures. We need connection because it's an innate need. God, this is annoying. Because communities help us survive for millennia. They help us survive and thrive in the most toughest of conditions. And personally, my favorite study is done by a professor at Harvard, and he observed his students over a period of 75 years, looking at what is it that really drives our well-being and what is needed to live healthy and happy lives. And what he found is that it's not about material possession, not about status. It's about our close relationships. And they have proven to be the driver to long and healthy and happy lives. And social isolation, on the other hand, social isolation and loneliness creates a higher risk for physical and mental health conditions. And really, what I was shocked when I read that loneliness is twice as deadly as smoking 15 cigarettes a day, and twice as likely as having obesity. And this includes like heart disease, anxiety, depression, cognitive decline, and those are all potential consequences of social isolation. So really, we need to foster community in cities. And I think a good example, my favorite example, and it's so simple in a way, but is the friendship bench in Zimbabwe. So they kind of placed benches all around the city, and they recruited mostly elderly people, and they trained them in talk therapy as a way to address depression and suicide ideation and lack of healthcare professionals. And the results are like quite stunning. They have supported 87,000 people so far, and according to their own impact results, it has shown to decrease depression with 61%, and suicide ideation and increased quality of life by 60%. So sometimes these small interventions that kind of come back to the core basic needs, they are so valuable. And another example about living in community among nature is Phoenix Project. And they aim to build and inspire a new generation of healthy and sustainable neighborhoods where people can live within the planet's limits. So they will have community gardens, places for artistic expression, physical exercise, like streets covered with trees, public spaces, parks. And what I find interesting is how they came to this plan is by organizing a 3-day design workshop to involve communities, neighborhoods, politicians, and to hear these different perspectives and work them into the design plan. So it's a really human-centered approach. They involved neighbors, they involved politicians and everyone to kind of co-create this neighborhood. And I think this is really what we should be going for, thinking about the future. It's engagement with communities and it's co-creation. I'm almost coming to an end here, so we can start a bit more of a conversation, but I think to create cities that enable people to thrive, we must assess how citizens experience their city and how it impacts their quality of life. And technology is one way to do so. There's already a lot of technologies that kind of allow us to take objective measures of how we experience a city through biomarker technologies that measure heart rate variability and shows us something about mood and psychological states. There's also subjective ways of gauging people's quality of life by just asking them questions at different times of the day. And there's also like different reports coming out that also take kind of this bottom-up approach and really ask people about how they're doing in relation to their context. And then something that I've also read on the website of Wellbeing Economy Alliance is the need to grow social capital. We need to improve the quality of relationship between residents of a particular city. And this can be done through inclusive decision-making and involvement of people in urban design. And one way we can do this is by growing the capacity for trust and reciprocity, which are two essential ingredients, especially considering all of the mess we're in right now that are caused by the lack of these qualities that we should nurture. And we also need to let go of silo thinking and put our heads and hearts together. And we are very serious at Passau in doing this. We can no longer operate in our own silos. We need to have conversations that bring people from these imagined boxes together to really start these important conversations. And then two more, and this is also, I'm a bit biased with this one, but I think we need to better appreciate art and beauty and their role in creating regenerative places of well-being. that really invoke our senses. People today, they're constantly living in their heads. They're not connected to the physical world around them anymore. And I think that art has such a powerful way of really making cities interesting. And it's also been shown that cities that have beautiful buildings or something that really draws people's attention, like art, like graffiti walls or whatever, they tend to have higher rates of people that actually take their bicycle or walk to work or to different places than taking the car, for example. And I think not most important, but also very important, is that we need to become more trauma informed. Yes, a city like Berlin has so many immigrants, myself included, but many people come from places, they had their own motives to flee their country, whether economically or through war or just for a better future, whatever the reasons. But we need to really look beyond what it is, beyond their appearances, and start having these conversations and making sure that they are heard. And on the other hand, we also need to recognize places of historic pain and suffering, look after them, and hold space for healing. For example, and I think I quickly want to read something that Tiff has beautifully written that I would just like to share. So trauma, yeah, so a place that takes trauma seriously. Such a design environment provides stability and peace, finds reconciliation with the past and embraces the future, preserves sensitive memories, and opens up the possibility of a new and nurturing spatial narrative to emerge. Both the Berlin Wall and Ground Zero were transformed into a memorial. These memorials are a powerful reminder that we all, individual and as a group, have the potential to recover and rebuild. And last but not least, since I haven't had the time and I think I'm already over time, is this quote by Alan Watts, which says that what you call the external world is as much you as your own body. Your skin doesn't separate you from the world. It's the bridge through which the world flows into you and you flow into the world. And I think it's important because we only see things or experience as something that is one directional. It's the external world that influences us, but as much it's about how our inner conditions, our inner lives influence how we see the world around us. And that's also why we need to shift the narrative to one that takes our inner lives more seriously and really cultivates inner well-being, inner peace, in order to see the world through a different perspective. So yeah, happy to talk about this more, or if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. And we can always stay in touch. It's my email address, and you can find me on LinkedIn. So thank you very much. I know I talked quite fast.
Thank you so much, Niels. That was really, really interesting and inspiring. And I can tell you the chat has been very active. I have two requests though, that they were wondering, a specific request is about your Harvard study. If there is any way that people can get, they can get it, or they can have access to it. And the other one is people were wondering if you could share this presentation, these slides with them. So I'll leave it there. So you know.
Sure, I will. So if you go to our website, which I'm not sure if anyone shared, it's masawa.fund, very simple. You can download the report and also be happy to send it to you in case maybe, I think, Anna, you can maybe deliver it to them.
Absolutely, yes, I will.
Yeah, does that answer your question? Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I think so. Okay. So I
will send the presentation as well. That's not a problem.
Okay, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much. And now I know that there has been really interesting comments on the chat. I don't know if anyone would like to add anything to what Niels has already developed and shared. Any thoughts, any sudden ideas or own experiences that you want to share with them? Lilian, go ahead.
Thank you, Niels. That was wonderful. A question that I have, a preliminary question I have for you is, some of these studies, how recent are they? Because we know, I mean, we have some numbers as of before COVID, and we have some of the studies that have started coming out, and they are more recent. And I would dare to say that some of the results we had before COVID are like tenfold, if not higher. Especially for people who have been living in cities that have been in lockdown and blah, blah, blah. So how recent, you know, studies, research numbers do you guys have been able to track?
That's a very good question. Yeah, we've seen different numbers. So the number, for example, I mentioned by 1 in 5 people that are dealing with mental health conditions, actually what we've seen during COVID is this number has increased a lot. As we're like dealing with uncertainty of not knowing when things will go back to normal again, like being in social isolation, we've seen that the numbers are actually higher, but there isn't any new information yet on how many people exactly on a global scale are dealing with these issues. That's why we haven't included that number. But I think it was around 60% of people that are really dealing now with increased levels of anxiety and depression. And I think if you look at younger people, I've seen a really interesting study by Project Healthy Minds, is that 90% of them are dealing with anxiety, and as a cause, I mean, during the pandemic, and even 40%, like almost half of them, experience deep anxiety every day. And I think, yeah, as also, I personally experience often most anxiety in relation to the ecological crises that we're facing today, especially having this deeper sense of like not feeling that you're sometimes alone in this conversation, or that you want to, you know, kind of what the truth is and what the solution is, in that sense that we need to live, reconnect closer to nature, but not the whole world is moving with you. So eco-anxiety, especially among Gen Z, my generation, is also really, yeah, on the rise. I hope that answers your question. I'd be happy to also have a conversation about this after some other point.
Jennifer, go ahead.
Thank you, Niels. In your work, you were talking about the composition of people living in cities. 50% of us live in cities, and that number is growing. In your work, have you looked at the composition of those cities, meaning the types of people that live there? So I saw a comment in the chat about disabled people, but also, looking at the racial diversity of cities, for example. And if you've done work around that, like how would that potentially change or not change what you've presented? Like, is there like an equity element to it?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and I'd definitely be interested in looking more into that. I've come across research, and I can't restate it because I don't, but I've seen that, for example, some communities, they're at increased risk of developing mental health issues. And that's also because there's a bunch of social determinants that actually increase our likelihood of developing these conditions. Growing up in poverty, for example, is one of them. And we know that some neighborhoods are more poor than others. And that connects to something I haven't really come to, is I think we need to reimagine how we design cities also in terms of socioeconomic classes that fortunately still are very present today. We need to design neighborhoods in which people with these different backgrounds can kind of come together, so we don't marginalize people in this sense, that they can kind of have these shared experiences of and that the awareness also grows of people that are living in different ways, instead of like isolating ourselves and living in our bubbles. But yeah, this is a super interesting question. I definitely want to look into that more. I know that I've seen some research in the US on, for example, among Black communities in the US, that there's higher experience of mental health issues as a result of the pandemic. But yeah, definitely. And if you have anything in this regard, please, I'm very interested in that too.
Sorry, I was just responding to Liliana and on the chat because Maria asked me for the same thing around the chat. I don't know why you don't have the capacity to save it because I have not, deleted or something like that. So I don't know if I'm not looking at the right place. But I'm gonna be saving the chat, and no worries about that. I'll keep it and share with everyone. Leah, please go ahead.
Yes, it's more like a reflection that
Yeah,
we
sure.
put together more than a question, really. I've been working for, I don't know, 25 years with cities and city civic leaders on ways of reimagining places, way of thinking how we can live better together. And every single time I come across the same challenge, which is a class challenge, a problem which is structural in the way our lives are organized under capitalism, which is basically that we have lost our capacity to empathize with people who are not from our class or do not belong to the same school or haven't had the same background or learning, etc. So I'm like, every time I keep thinking, what if we developed education more in a way that it becomes an ongoing, informal way of learning to live together, learning to empathize together through literacy of every sort. Because I know personally, in terms of well-being, that if I read a novel, I'm more equipped to understand what you guys are thinking or the way you are reading me, etc., because I have empathized with the characters in that fiction or novel. And I'm thinking, how about people who do not use or have no access or don't want to read fiction or haven't learned the passion to read fiction, etc. So ideally, in my view, reimagining cities for the future, it will have these three words, once again: education, education, and education, as well as nature and all the rest of it, as well as design and all the rest of it. But I keep going back to that. Sorry, but that's my challenge, really.
I really agree with that, and I would like others later to respond as well if they feel compelled to do so. But yeah, education is enormously important. I think it's not just about textbook learning, but it's about experiential learning and creating spaces in which we can connect across our imagined divides. And again, coupling back to what I was saying earlier, like I've grown up in a village, and I think what really was a barrier for me to connect deeply is that, and I think you can find statistics on this, people tend to be more conservative and have a bigger fear of change, which leads to certain political ideas that are difficult for me to, I understand them on like an abstract level, but it's more difficult to like bodily engage with that in a way. So, and it's in cities that I think people tend to hold certain political views that are more progressive in that sense, because we just come in touch with people from different backgrounds, with different cultures and ideas a lot more. And it's really providing a space in which we can kind of learn together about our backgrounds, which I think is also the beauty of it, that we are all different in a way, but we're still connected by this shared humanity of being human. So I definitely agree that it's all about education, and I'd love to invite anyone else if they have anything to add to this.
Thank you so much, Leah. Indy, I don't know if it's building up on this comment, or just open your mic and share with us.
For the beautiful promotion of my photography, by the way.
This stuff, yeah, your stuff is really cool. Thank you for sharing your art and what you enjoy, what helps you connect to nature and yourself. Wow. I mean, thank you for bringing up that comment about the cities. I have to add this. In my own experience being involved in city staff, city council, city management, how, my interest especially started during this pandemic, and how do we create an emotional task force, a social emotional task force for my community? And the more I kind of got into, and I'm in a very liberal city, mind you, right? I'm in I live in a very liberal area. What I noticed is the leadership the leadership is incredibly ignorant and unwell and unhealthy. Like, I mean, and I've gotten like seen it like in the health establishments and educational establishment, now political establishments. The people at the top are really unhealthy. like we're walking around and we're going on walks in parks. They're not doing that. They're not meditating. They're not. Very few of them are actually healthy themselves. So I actually think I'm like, put this proposition out there for all of us who care. We're on this call because we care. Let me encourage you all to think about how evil is very rarely sophisticated. It's usually very banal, right? Like the banality of evil. And a lot of these people at the top are going to keep doing the wrong thing because they're unhealthy. So whatever we want to do, doesn't matter if the people making decisions are unhealthy. We're always going to move towards a healthy environment, right? Naturally. So let's all try to find some compassion for these folks and dive in and try to see how we can introduce these healthy practices to the people who make decisions. I'm just throwing that out there.
That's such a valid.
We're really grateful. We're really grateful because I completely agree. Yeah, thank you so much, Indy. You put it really right. Andy.
Sorry, I was actually writing a response to what was just said there. I'll finish that in a minute. Yeah, no, I've been extremely lucky in that I've always lived in rural communities. I have never lived in a city. I have never seen the attraction of living in a city, and I hope that I never will live in a city. So yeah, I find it quite difficult to sort of associate why you would want to subject yourself to that kind of environment. Because it's just so the way it appears to me is that it's certainly, at least even just from a mental health point of view, it's just such a toxic environment for people to live in. It's just yeah, do I want to use that first? Yeah, it's almost against the natural order of things for us to live in that type of environment. It seems quite a bizarre thing to want to do to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely feel that way too, but I think it's a mix. I think part of me is like, I'm a very strong optimist, so maybe I'll live in an illusion, but I think that that there are ways to change this. It's about how we show up every day that can also like create these ripple effects among the people around you. And it's also about surrounding yourself with the right people that kind of also share a bit of this optimism. But yeah, for me, it's been, I feel like the rhythm in a city is unnatural. I think we're constantly, like I said, living in our heads. We're constantly going about from one place to the other, not taking time to even look around, often because it's just ugly. But yeah, I can definitely resonate with part of that. But for me, I moved here because it still has access to nature. Like I can take the S-Bahn and be in nature and swim in lakes in 30 minutes from here. But I also needed just this, like I live in Neukölln, which is a very multicultural habitat, and I can just step out of the door and feel like I'm a little bit somewhere else, but still know that I'm in Germany. And it feels like this is just all about the experience for me and of having these different cultures that, and there's, that's just my point of view. But I can.
There are a few people in this room who love cities. It's not a matter of loving or hating, or is probably trying to find what is positive, what is healthy, what is what we can bring from one space or the other, what we can learn, what we can exchange, and there is a lot to learn from the rural and from the cities and from the urban areas as well. So Peter, you have your hand raised. Your turn.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. The topic is very near and dear to my heart. I've done a lot of different things related to what you're talking about. I mean, first of all, the coaching that I do, people are often, bringing their current situation into a coaching session, including anxiety, and then the connection to nature is often something that people come up with as a way to find more balance in their life. I also used to work for a city, so I really appreciate the comment that Indy made and about what it's like to engage with city officials. And I happen to have worked on a project in Southern California, which won many awards because of the transformation that it created in the city. The point that I want to make here, though, is that despite these public officials being however they are, we can make judgments or categorizations. I find that it takes some amazing, bold vision to, like, somebody that really can have and carry a strong vision into the world to actually create the kind of change that we're talking about. And like what made the project that I worked on successful is there was that extremely bold vision about how to make a more livable street, a more livable city, and months of public outreach and engagement. So getting the buy-in, so people that are living there actually have the ability to create what they want. But it's like what comes first is like maybe one of us just has this like crazy bold vision of like, we got to do this. This is what's needed for the community, for our city. And then it takes a long time. Public infrastructure is probably one of the most slow moving things to change. And there are days, and today with fast moving technology and apps and this kinds of thing, it's nice to actually be engaging today in this conversation about infrastructure and city plan and urban planning, but it takes a long time. Yeah. So.
Just to ask, I'm just curious, like, what do you think, besides like you talking about the bold vision, but how did you find allies in this process? Because I think it's, or what was like the one thing that really made the difference for example, in how you engage with those people? Can you speak? I'm just interested.
I mean, this project was a while ago, but I think at the time that it was happening, nobody was really taking this public outreach process seriously, or as seriously as we did. I think city officials, or city is obligated to make notifications or to maybe hold a meeting, but it's like that's a way of saying like, hey, we're talking about this thing, you better come over here and chime in if you're interested in this thing that we're wanting to develop. But the public engagement that we're talking about is like, oh, it's running a campaign, if you will. Like, it's like, how do we get more people interested and involved in this? How many meetings do we need to have? What are the topics and what are the agendas of these things? So it's kind of like taking the story to the people is, it's much different than just like posting or doing a mailing and asking people to show up and engage in the public process, which most people don't want to do. So I can just say, like, in this case, it was pretty extraordinary that we were creating a story, or creating a campaign about what we want to do, what we're going to do, and that we want you. And so we want the public to engage. And I think probably maybe much more of this happens now, but can't say for sure. But that was a really, I think that's why the project won awards, is the public outreach piece.
Super interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. And well, I am conscious that we're almost, we're really close to the hour, but Ben, you have your hand raised, and we would love to hear what you want to share with us.
Great, thanks very much. Thanks so much for presenting and everyone for sharing. There's so much to speak to here. It's kind of where to start. In a reductionist way, that idea of cities, therefore buildings, therefore equals poor mental health. I think there's a question of like, why are we saying we want greenery and we want to be outside and we want to reconnect with nature? And for me, having grown up in the countryside and now living in Berlin as well, in the cities, having also felt the intensity of COVID as well, what speaks to me is around movement, physical movement, We've touched here many times around the health of people, interacting with nature through our senses. I screen grabbed Alan Watts's things around the world as much as the external world as much of your own body. And I think when we talk around mental health, we have this problem and intensity in our minds, and we're like, well, let's just think of new ways to fix our mind. And we've totally forgotten about our bodies. The fact that we grew up roaming landscape, and now we are stuck inside on top of each other, in front of screens, technologies in front of us. Even the fact that our screens are an arm's length away, which means our eyes diverge into an alert place. When you look at the meadow or the sunset, your eyes and the muscles around it relax, and that's helping your nervous system calm down. We've forgotten that our bodies are actually the tool that we need to fix our mental health, because our physical health supports our emotional health, and our emotional health fixes our mental health. So here, when we need to, for me, developing any city and getting people together, it's around giving people the opportunity to physically move. And that's really how we start to rebuild. And social connection is built because we have to work together as people. Again, evolutionary part of us, polyvagal theory is a wonderful thing to look into, the idea that we need to regulate with each other, because when we're isolated, we can't regulate, therefore we get anxious, we get stressed, we get depressed, and therefore we fall apart at the seams. And the problem is that cities and certain Western cultures that have become idealistic, kind of, we don't need to share anything anymore. We all have phones, we all have opportunities to get for food. We don't need each other anymore. We don't need to rely on each other. So when we see somebody else, we see them more as a threat than a friend. So community, of course, is incredibly important, but I think it's also about reconnecting with our physical, our senses, and remembering that, yes, we've got a brain, but we've also got a body that is the key to our health.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. And I can definitely really, that's so true. Like, and that's why I believe, again, like, just beautifying our cities a little more. It doesn't need to be super expensive interventions, but just engaging people in a way that with the city that makes them want to walk again is super important. And yeah, I think if we've had internal conversations about this as well, with, among others, Joshua, who's our founder here as well, about this idea that we're so focusing on the mental aspect, but for us it's also about, we have been talking about physical health before, but it's about like shifting a bit of that attention to, look, we have mental health too, mental well-being too, but at the end of the day, it's about everything is connected, like it's all part of the same holistic whole person well-being. And this is ideally what we need to be looking at, again, our whole bodies and how they interact with the world. And yeah, physical movement and physical health is such an important part of that. So thanks for bringing that up. I also want to look more into this polyvagal theory. Is that it?
Yeah, if you can add some information on the chat, that would be wonderful, Ben. And thank you for bringing this into the topic. And then, Wendy, I'm sorry, but I didn't see your hand, but somebody, Andy, thank you so much for pointing it out. Wendy, we're going to wrap up the this WEAll talk with you. You're muted.
I'll be quick.
No.
I just wanted to follow up on Niels and Peter's discussion, just to say, in the work and the conversations that I've had with both the Child Friendly Cities Initiative and the Compassionate Cities Initiative, the single biggest element and most important element for the projects that were successful was the engagement of a visionary leader who stayed in position, particularly someone who didn't then change role after 2 years, because the biggest issue that both had was a mayor or someone who was completely passionate about the project, who was there for 18 months, someone else took over and it dropped. So I just wanted to say, yes, that visionary leadership is kind of the essential element. Yeah, but Niels, nice to see you, and thoroughly enjoyed.
Nice to see you again, Amanda. Thanks for joining.
Well, 2 minutes for the hour. Thank you, Neil, so much for bringing this so important and key topic to all of us. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to discuss about this. I'm positive that we could continue talking and bring in so many other aspects that are all, as you were saying, everything is interconnected. As always, grateful for all of you for showing up, for participants, for participant. Oh God, English, for participating with all of us. We love your contributions. We love hearing your own ideas and your own challenges and your own ways of looking at the topic that we decide to bring in this space. We'll hear about the next WEAll talk for February. Surprise, surprise. You'll be all invited. And as always, if anyone in here is not connected to WEAll, please join the WEAll Citizens platform. Please connect with me at anna.weall.org if you want to become part of this global family. It's been a pleasure to spend this time with all of you, and sending you hugs from Spain, sunny and cold Spain. And please have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world.
Thank you so much, Anna, for creating the space, and thanks everyone for joining. I actually really enjoyed it, so thank you.
I'm really glad. That is the point.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day, evening. Bye-bye.